The sun was falling behind the dry hills, painting the land in a soft orange glow. A poor cowboy named Tom walked slowly beside his old donkey, Buddy. The dusty road stretched far ahead, leading to a place no one had cared about for years. Tom's boots were torn, his hat was old, and his clothes showed the hard life he had lived. Buddy was tired too, carrying a small bag filled with tools, water, and a few dry biscuits. Tom was not always poor. Years ago, he had worked on a cattle ranch where life was busy and full of laughter. But when the owner sold the ranch and left, Tom lost his job. Since then, he had been moving from one town to another, doing small work just to survive. People knew him as a quiet man who loved animals and never spoke badly about anyone. One evening, while resting near a small town called Maple Creek, Tom heard two men talking near the general store. They spoke about an old ranch up north that had burned down decades ago. It was said to be haunted, and no one had dared to buy it since the fire. Tom listened silently. The way they described it made him curious. A burned ranch with land still untouched could mean a chance for him to build something new. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about that ranch. He had always dreamed of having a small place he could call home, somewhere peaceful where he and Buddy could rest. "Maybe it's time," he whispered to Buddy as the stars shone above. The donkey blinked slowly, almost as if he agreed. The next morning, Tom packed his small things and started the journey. The road was rough and full of dust, but he didn't mind. He had walked harder paths before. After 2 long days, they reached a valley where dry grass covered the land. At the far end stood the remains of the old ranch. The gate was half broken, swinging gently in the wind. Charred wood and rusted iron lay scattered around. The barn was gone, only black beams stood like silent ghosts. The main house had collapsed long ago, leaving behind a pile of burned stone and wood. The place looked sad, forgotten by time. Tom stood quietly, looking at the ruins. "Looks like we got ourselves a lot of work, Buddy," he said with a small smile. The donkey brayed softly, lowering his head. Tom walked inside the old gate and tied Buddy near a patch of wild grass. He then explored the area carefully, checking what was left. He found a well covered with dry leaves. When he removed the cover and looked inside, there was still water at the bottom. It gave him hope. Nearby, he found the stone base of what used to be a barn wall. The stones were strong enough to rebuild. He picked one up and smiled. "Still got some life in you," he said quietly. For the next few days, Tom and Buddy worked from dawn till sunset. He cleared the ashes, collected usable wood, and built a small shelter near the well. At night, he lit a small fire and sat beside it, thinking about how he would rebuild the ranch. He didn't have much money, but he had time and patience. One morning, while collecting stones from a nearby hill, he met an old man riding a horse. The man stopped and looked at him curiously. "You're not from around here," the old man said. "No, sir," Tom replied politely. "Just trying to fix this old place." The old man laughed softly. "That place burned down 30 years ago. Folks say it's cursed." Tom smiled. "Maybe it just needs someone to care again." The old man nodded slowly. "You've got spirit, cowboy. My name's George. I live down the river. If you ever need water or tools, come by." Tom thanked him kindly. That evening, George brought a few old planks and nails for him. They shared tea near the fire, talking about the past. George told him how the ranch used to be full of horses and how the fire started by accident one summer night. No one ever rebuilt it since. "Seems a shame to let the land die," Tom said. George nodded. "If you can bring life back here, son, maybe the town will remember what hope feels like." The next morning, Tom started rebuilding the fence. It was slow work, but he enjoyed it. Buddy helped by carrying wood and tools. Sometimes the donkey would stop and stare at the far hills as if he sensed something beyond the horizon. Tom would smile and say, "Don't worry, Buddy, we're making this place home." Days turned into weeks. The shelter became a small cabin. The land started to look alive again. Tom planted a few seeds near the well and built a trough for Buddy. When the first rain came, he stood outside, letting the drops wash away the dust from his face. It felt like a blessing, but the nights were still lonely. The wind would whistle through the empty land and strange sounds would echo from the hills. Sometimes Tom thought he saw lights flickering near the burned barn ruins. One night, while sitting by the fire, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned quickly, but no one was there. Buddy brayed nervously. Tom spoke softly. "It's all right, friend. Just the wind." Yet, Deep inside, he felt there was something about this place and something waiting to be discovered. A week later, while digging near the barn's foundation, Tom's shovel hit something hard. He brushed away the dirt and found a metal box half buried in the ground. The box was old and rusty but still locked. He carried it to his cabin and opened it carefully using his knife. Inside, he found a few burned papers, a small pocket watch, and a faded photograph of a family, a man, a woman, and a young boy standing proudly in front of the same ranch long before it burned. Tom looked at the picture for a long time. This was their home, he whispered. He placed the photograph on the table. Somehow he felt a connection to that family, even though they were strangers from another time. He decided that he would rebuild this ranch not just for himself, but also for them, to bring their memory back to life. As the moon rose over the valley that night, Tom sat outside beside Buddy. The wind was calm and the stars shone bright. "Tomorrow we start building the barn," he said softly. The donkey gave a soft sound as if agreeing again. The firelight flickered against the old stones, and for the first time, the ranch didn't look abandoned anymore. It looked like a place waiting to live again. Tom closed his eyes, feeling peace. He didn't have much, no money, no fine clothes, no big dreams, but he had a purpose now. A burned ranch and a loyal donkey were all he needed to start a new life. The next morning, the air was fresh after the night's rain. The land smelled alive again, and the clouds were slowly drifting away. Tom stepped outside his small cabin and stretched his arms. The soft sound of Buddy chewing grass nearby made him smile. The sun was climbing over the hills, casting a golden light across the ruined ranch. Tom looked at the photograph he had found inside the metal box. The picture was old and faded, but he could still see the family's smiles. The man in the photo wore a wide hat and had kind eyes. The woman had a soft face, and the little boy looked proud standing between them. The burned ranch behind them was once full of life. Tom carefully placed the photo on a shelf he made from old planks. "We'll bring your home back," he said quietly. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It had become a promise. He began his day by gathering wood from the nearby forest. Buddy helped by carrying logs tied with a rope. The donkey moved slowly but faithfully, never complaining. Together, they stacked the wood beside the old barn's foundation. As Tom worked, he noticed strange marks on one of the large stones. They looked like initials, JW, carved deep into the rock. He ran his fingers over the letters and wondered if it belonged to the man in the photo. "Maybe your name was John," he murmured. Later that day, George came by on his horse. He brought nails, an old hammer, and a small bag of food. "Thought you could use some supplies," George said with a smile. Tom thanked him warmly. They sat near the fire and shared bread and coffee. George looked at the half-built cabin and nodded. "You've done good work, Tom. This place is starting to look like a home again." Tom smiled shyly. "Still a long way to go, but I'll get there." George's eyes fell on the photograph inside the cabin. "You found that here?" he asked. "Yes, buried near the barn," Tom replied. "Do you know who they are?" George looked closer and nodded slowly. "That's the Walker family. John Walker owned this ranch a long time ago. He was a good man, helped everyone around here. When the fire came, it spread so fast that they couldn't save anything. Folks said the family left town after that. No one saw them again." Tom listened carefully. "So it was an accident?" George nodded. "Yes, lightning struck the barn one summer night. The fire took everything. For a moment, silence filled the air. The only sound was the crackling fire." Tom looked at the picture again and said softly, "Then I'll make this place live again." "For them?" George smiled kindly. "You've got a good heart, Cowboy. I'll help you when I can." Days passed, and Tom continued his work. He rebuilt the fence line, repaired the gate, and raised the walls of the new barn. It was hard work, but he enjoyed every moment of it. He could almost imagine the ranch as it once was, filled with horses, laughter, and life. Buddy followed him everywhere. When Tom dug the ground for new fence posts, Buddy stood nearby watching. When Tom rested, Buddy would nudge him gently, asking for attention. The donkey had become more than a companion. He was part of the dream. One evening, while the sun was setting, Tom sat on a rock near the well. The golden light made the land look beautiful. He noticed something shining in the dirt near the well. Curious, he brushed away the soil and found a small key. It was old and rusty, but it looked like it might fit the lock of the metal box he had found earlier. He ran back to the cabin and tried it. The key turned slowly, unlocking a hidden part under the box's lid.
Inside, there was a folded piece of cloth.
He opened it carefully and found a hand-drawn map. It showed the layout of the ranch, and there was a mark near the forest with the words, "Family Chest," written beside it. Tom stared at the map in surprise. "A family chest?" he said quietly. His heart began to beat faster. Maybe it was buried treasure, or maybe just memories of the Walker family. Whatever it was, he had to find it. The next morning, Tom and Buddy walked toward the forest marked on the map. The path was narrow, covered in grass and fallen branches. Birds sang in the trees and sunlight filtered through the leaves. After walking for about half an hour, they reached a clearing where the ground looked disturbed, as if it had been dug long ago. Tom used his shovel and began digging. The soil was hard, but he didn't stop. Sweat ran down his face and his arms ached, yet he kept going. Finally, his shovel hit something solid. He cleared the dirt away and found an old wooden chest covered in moss. He pulled it out carefully and opened it. Inside were a few items: a silver locket, a child's toy horse, and a small leather book. He opened the book and saw handwriting inside. It was a diary. The first page read, "This ranch is our dream. No matter what happens, may our home always be remembered." Tom's eyes softened. He sat there quietly reading the diary. The words were full of love and hope. Stories about the Walker family's daily life, their laughter, their hard work, and their dreams for the ranch. There was no greed, no anger, only the simple wish to live peacefully on their land. As the wind blew gently through the trees, Tom closed the diary and whispered, "I'll make sure your dream lives on." He took the chest back to the cabin and placed it beside the photograph. That night, as he sat by the fire, he read more from the diary. The words made him feel close to the family, almost like they were watching over him. But something strange began to happen in the following days. When Tom worked near the old barn, he sometimes felt a soft breeze even when the air was still. Once he heard faint laughter like a child playing in the distance. At first he thought it was his imagination, but the feeling of peace that came with those sounds made him believe it wasn't something to fear. One night he woke up to the gentle sound of footsteps outside. He opened the door and saw nothing but the moonlight shining on the land. Buddy stood still, ears twitching but calm. Tom smiled and said softly, "If that's you, Mr. Walker, don't worry. I'm taking care of your home." The wind blew gently, almost like an answer. From that day, Tom worked even harder. The barn walls rose higher. The roof began to take shape and the land started to bloom again. Birds returned. Grass grew greener and the well water became clearer. Even George was surprised when he came to visit. "You've brought life back to this place," he said with wonder. Tom just smiled and looked at Buddy. "We just gave it a little care." That night, as he sat by the fire, Tom looked around and felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The ranch no longer felt empty. It felt alive, full of memories, dreams, and hope. He knew he had found his place in the world. The burned ranch was no longer a forgotten ruin. It was becoming a home again, for a poor cowboy, his loyal donkey, and the spirit of a family who once loved it dearly. The days grew warmer and spring painted the valley with color again. Wildflowers spread across the hills and the sound of birds returned to the air. Tom stood outside the barn one morning, looking at what he and Buddy had built. The walls were strong, the roof was patched with fresh wood, and a small windmill near the well turned gently in the breeze. He ran his hand over the barn door and smiled. "We did good, Buddy," he said softly. The donkey flicked his tail and gave a small bray as if agreeing. It had been weeks since Tom found the Walker family's diary and chest. Every night he read a few pages by the fire. The diary told stories about how the family built the ranch from nothing, how they worked hard through storms and dry seasons, and how they loved their animals like family. Those stories gave Tom strength. He felt like he was walking the same path they once did, rebuilding hope with his hands. That morning, Tom decided it was time to start raising animals again. The land was healing and the barn was ready. He packed his small bag and rode Buddy toward Maple Creek town. The road was long but calm, with sunlight dancing over the grass. When they reached the town, people looked at him with surprise. Many had thought he would give up after seeing the burned ranch. But here he was, taller, prouder and full of quiet determination. Tom visited the local livestock trader, an old man named Mr. Harris. He greeted Tom warmly. "Well, if it isn't the cowboy who bought the ghost ranch," he said with a chuckle. Tom smiled. "It's not a ghost ranch anymore, sir. It's becoming a home." Mr. Harris raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You mean you're rebuilding that place?" "Yes, little by little," Tom replied. "Now I'm looking to buy a few chickens, maybe a couple of goats. Nothing fancy, just enough to start small." The old man thought for a moment. "You've got courage, son. Not many would try to bring life back there. Tell you what, I've got some animals I was planning to sell cheap. I'll give them to you at half price." Tom's eyes brightened. "Thank you, sir. I promise to take good care of them." Mr. Harris smiled kindly. "I can see that in your eyes. Hard work never fails." By afternoon, Tom and Buddy were heading back toward the ranch with a small cart tied behind them. Inside were 4 chickens, 2 goats, and a few sacks of grain. The sun was setting as they reached home. The animals made soft sounds, curious about their new home. Tom opened the barn door and guided them inside. The chickens clucked happily, the goats sniffed around, and Buddy watched proudly as if guarding his new friends. Tom sat on the step outside the barn and looked up at the evening sky. The stars were slowly appearing one by one. He felt peace deep inside. "We're not alone anymore, Buddy," he whispered. The donkey rested his head on Tom's shoulder, and they sat together under the stars. The following days were filled with new life. Tom woke up early every morning to feed the animals and clean the barn. He fixed the old fence around the chicken coop and built a small pen for the goats. Every little sound, the cluck of chickens, the bleat of goats, the creak of wood, made the ranch feel alive again. One morning, George arrived with his horse and smiled widely when he saw the changes. "By heavens, Tom, this place looks like a real ranch again," he said. Tom laughed softly. "Still a long way to go, but it's starting to feel like home." George helped him plant vegetables near the well, carrots, beans, and potatoes. Together they worked until sunset. Before leaving, George said, "You've done something special here. You've given this land a new heart." After George left, Tom sat near the cabin with the diary in his hand. He opened it to a page where the Walker family had written about planting their first crops. The handwriting was shaky but full of hope. He smiled and said softly, "We're doing the same thing, Mr. Walker, just like you." That night, a soft wind blew through the valley. Tom dreamed of the ranch as it used to be, full of horses and laughter. In his dream, he saw the same man from the photograph smiling at him and tipping his hat before walking away into the light. When Tom woke up, he felt strangely calm, as if the dream had been a message of thanks. A few days later, Tom started building a small corral for future animals. He didn't have much wood left, so he went to the forest to gather more. Buddy followed close behind, carrying ropes and tools. As they walked deeper into the trees, they came across an old wooden sign half buried in the ground. Tom brushed off the dirt and read the faded letters. Walker Ranch, Esther 1884. He smiled softly. So this was its name, he said. Walker Ranch. He picked up the sign carefully and decided to hang it on the front gate once it was fixed. It would remind everyone that the land still carried its name, its history, and its soul. When Tom returned to the ranch, he cleaned the sign and placed it against the gate. The letters were faint but still readable. He ran his fingers across them and said quietly, "Welcome home." That evening, while feeding the goats, Tom noticed something strange near the barn wall. The ground there was slightly uneven, and he remembered the diary mentioning a cornerstone where the family used to bury time capsules during special events. Curious, he dug a little and soon found a small tin box. Inside there was a folded paper with a message written in neat handwriting. "If anyone ever finds this, please remember, this land is not just soil and wood. It is love, hard work, and family. Keep it alive." Tom held the paper close to his heart. "I will," he whispered. As days turned into weeks, the ranch flourished. The vegetables sprouted, the animals grew healthy, and the land became green again. Neighbors who passed by on their way to town began to stop and look with surprise. Some even helped by giving seeds, tools, and advice. The burned ranch that everyone once called cursed was now becoming the most peaceful place in the valley. One afternoon, a young boy from town came running to the ranch gate. "Mister, my pa says your place looks real nice now," he said shyly. Tom smiled. "Tell your pa he's welcome to visit any time." The boy grinned and waved before running back down the road. Tom watched him go, feeling proud. The ranch was no longer just his dream. It had become something bigger, a symbol of hope for the people around. That night, as the stars filled the sky, Tom sat near the fire with Buddy lying beside him. The flames danced gently and the wind carried the sweet smell of grass. He looked around, the barn, the animals, the crops, the old sign, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. "This is home now, Buddy," he said softly. "A real home." Buddy gave a low, happy sound, closing his eyes as if he understood every word. The burned ranch that had once been forgotten now glowed with life and peace. It stood proudly once more thanks to a poor cowboy's heart, a loyal donkey's patience, and the memory of a family who had never truly left. But what Tom didn't know was that the land still held one last secret, something buried deep that would change everything he thought he knew about the Walker family and the ranch's past. The sun rose over the hills, bathing the valley in gold. The ranch looked alive now, with green patches, strong fences, and the sweet sound of animals waking up. Tom stepped out of his cabin, breathing in the fresh air. The windmill creaked softly, and Buddy stood near the barn waiting for his morning feed. Tom smiled. "Morning, Buddy. We've got another busy day." He fed the animals, filled the water trough, and checked the crops near the well. The plants were growing well, and the goats had already given milk. Everything seemed peaceful. But deep inside, Tom couldn't stop thinking about the words he had found inside the small tin box. Keep it alive. They echoed in his mind every time he looked at the land. Later that morning, George came by with his horse. He brought a bag of fresh bread from town and a few tools Tom had asked for. "Morning, Tom," George said cheerfully. "Your ranch looks better every time I visit." Tom smiled. "Thanks, George. Couldn't have done it without your help." George tied his horse near the fence and walked around the land admiring the changes. "You know," he said, "folks in town are talking about this place again. They say the cowboy who rebuilt the old Walker ranch might just be the man who brought luck back to the valley." Tom laughed softly. "Luck or hard work, I'll take either one." They both sat near the well, eating bread and sharing stories. Tom told George about the time capsule he had found and the message inside. George's eyes widened. "That's something, son. The Walkers were good people. Maybe they wanted to make sure their love stayed in the land forever." After George left, Tom decided to work near the old burned section of the ranch, the part he hadn't fully cleaned yet. It was near where the main house had once stood. Blackened stones and broken beams still lay half buried in the dirt. He wanted to clear the area completely before building anything new. As he worked, his shovel hit something hard beneath the ashes. At first, he thought it was just another rock, but when he brushed the dirt away, he saw a metal edge. Curious, he dug deeper. Slowly, he uncovered a small iron door set into the ground. It was covered in rust, but still solid. Tom stared at it, surprised. "What are you doing here?" he murmured. He knelt down and tried to lift the handle, but it was stuck. He fetched his tools and worked on the lock until it finally gave way with a creak. Dust and stale air rose as he pulled the door open. Beneath it was a narrow staircase leading underground. For a moment, Tom hesitated. The place looked dark and untouched since the fire, but his curiosity was stronger than his fear. He lit a lantern, tied it to a rope, and began to climb down slowly. The air was cool and damp, and the steps creaked under his boots. At the bottom, he found a small underground room made of stone. The walls were blackened from smoke, but the structure was still strong. Old shelves lined one side, filled with burnt papers and broken jars. On the floor, half buried in dust, was a wooden chest larger than the one he had found before. Tom placed the lantern on a rock and opened the chest carefully. Inside were several items, some old tools, a few silver coins, and a thick book wrapped in cloth. When he opened the book, he realized it was another diary, written in the same handwriting as the first one. The first line read, "If this is ever found, let it be known that our land hides more than our memories." Tom sat down and began reading by the lantern light. The diary told a story about the months before the fire. It described how John Walker had discovered something strange beneath the ranch, an old spring of clean water running deep under the soil. He believed it was a gift of nature that made the land so rich. But he also wrote about men who wanted to buy the land and take that water for profit. Walker refused to sell, and soon after, the fire destroyed everything. Tom's hands trembled slightly. So that's what happened, he whispered. The fire wasn't just an accident. He kept reading. The last page said, "If our land ever breathes again, may the one who rebuilds it protect its heart." Tom closed the diary slowly. He looked around the underground room and saw a narrow tunnel leading deeper under the earth. He followed it for a short distance until he reached a small pool of crystal-clear water. The sound of dripping echoed softly. It was beautiful, pure and untouched. "This must be the spring," Tom said. He knelt beside it and touched the water. It was cool and clean. He filled a small cup from his bag and took a sip. The water tasted fresh, like rain. He realized this was the hidden secret of the Walker Ranch, the reason the land stayed alive, even after decades of fire and neglect. The spring was the heart of the ranch, the life that never died. Tom climbed back up, closing the iron door behind him. As he stepped into the sunlight, Buddy brayed loudly as if welcoming him back. Tom smiled and patted the donkey's neck. "You won't believe what I found, Buddy." That night, Tom sat near the fire, thinking deeply. He now understood why the ranch had felt so peaceful since the day he arrived. The water beneath the land was keeping everything alive. The crops, the animals, even the memories. He decided to protect it, just like the diary asked. The next day, he went to George's house to tell him everything. George listened with surprise and concern. "If you're right about that spring, Tom, you must keep it secret. Some people would do anything to get their hands on that kind of water." Tom nodded. "I won't tell anyone else. It belongs to this land. It's what keeps it alive," George agreed. "You're a good man, Tom. The Walkers would be proud." When Tom returned home, he stood near the burned ruins of the old house. He looked up at the sky and said softly, "Mr. Walker, your secret is safe. I'll protect it, no matter what." The wind moved gently across the valley, and for a moment, Tom thought he heard a whisper, faint but warm, almost like a thank you. Weeks passed, and the ranch continued to grow. The vegetables were healthy and the animals multiplied. Neighbors from nearby towns began visiting, amazed at how fertile the land had become. Some asked what Tom had done to make it so green. He just smiled and said, "Maybe the land just needed a little care." At night, when the stars filled the sky, Tom often sat near the barn with Buddy beside him. He would watch the windmill turning slowly and feel peace deep inside. The burned ranch had become a home, filled with life, friendship, and purpose. But one evening, while Tom was fixing a fence, he noticed two strangers standing near the road, watching the ranch quietly. They wore fine clothes and had sharp eyes. When they saw Tom looking at them, they turned and walked away toward town. Tom frowned slightly. Who were they? He wondered. Buddy brayed softly, sensing his unease. He looked back at the land, the barn, and the peaceful valley. Something told him the story of the ranch wasn't over yet. The secret he had promised to protect might soon be tested. He placed his hand gently on Buddy's neck and said quietly, "Whatever happens, we'll stand together. This is our home now." The wind blew softly across the fields, carrying the scent of earth and grass. The stars shone bright above the valley, and the rebuilt ranch stood proud under the moonlight, alive, strong, and full of hidden stories still waiting to be told. The morning sun stretched over the hills, casting a warm golden light across the Walker Ranch. Tom stepped outside his cabin, taking a deep breath of the fresh air. Birds chirped in the trees, the goats and chickens moved happily around the barn, and the windmill turned slowly, creaking gently in the soft breeze. Buddy was already waiting near the barn, ready for the day's work. Tom smiled, patting the donkey's neck. "Another good day ahead, Buddy," he said. The donkey brayed softly in reply. It had been months since Tom first discovered the ranch burned and forgotten. Now it was alive again. The barn stood tall and strong, the fields were green, and the small garden was thriving. Even the neighbors had begun to notice the difference. Farmers passing through would wave or stop to admire the progress. Some brought seeds, tools, or advice. Tom was grateful, but he knew the heart of the ranch lay beneath the land, the hidden spring that had kept the valley fertile for so many years. That morning, as Tom fed the animals, he saw two strangers approaching the ranch from the road. Their clothes were neat and their eyes sharp. Tom felt a small twinge of caution but kept his calm. He knew the land and the animals were safe. He tied Buddy near the barn and walked toward them. "Good morning," he said politely. "Can I help you?" The taller man stepped forward. "We heard about this ranch. We want to buy it, Tom frowned. It's not for sale. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We're willing to pay a lot, more than anyone else could. Tom shook his head. This land isn't just soil and wood. It's a home, a history. Money can't buy that. The man's expression hardened. He turned, signaling the other stranger. They walked away, muttering to each other. Tom watched them go, feeling relief and pride. The ranch wasn't for sale, and it never would be. After the strangers left, Tom went to the barn and checked the animals. Everything was safe. Buddy nuzzled him gently, and Tom smiled. Don't worry, friend. We'll keep it safe. Days passed and life continued peacefully. Tom spent his time repairing old fences, planting more vegetables, and caring for the animals. He also explored more of the land, discovering small patches of fertile soil perfect for more crops. Each day he felt closer to the Walker family, as if their spirit was guiding him. One afternoon, Tom decided to visit the old spring beneath the barn. The iron door was heavy, but he opened it carefully. The underground room was cool, and the water sparkled in the lantern light. He knelt beside the pool, filling a small bucket to water the garden. This place saved the land, he whispered, and now we're keeping it alive. He took a moment to read from the diary he had found in the hidden chest. The Walker family had written about hope, courage, and the love they poured into the ranch. Tom felt their presence in every word, in every stone he had rebuilt, and in every animal that roamed the land. As spring turned to summer, the ranch became more than just a home for Tom and Buddy. It was a place of life and joy. The garden flourished. Goats gave plenty of milk, and the chickens laid eggs every day. Tom even rescued a stray dog that wandered near the fence and named him Rusty. The dog quickly became part of their small family, running through the fields with Buddy and keeping watch over the animals. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, George rode over on his horse. He smiled widely at the sight of the thriving ranch. You've done something amazing, Tom, he said. This place is alive again, thanks to you. Tom shook his head humbly. The land gave me everything. I just listened and worked with it. George looked around and nodded. It's more than just work. You brought back hope. People will remember that. That night, Tom sat by the fire with Buddy and Rusty nearby. He looked around the cabin, the barn, and the fields glowing in the firelight. The air smelled of grass and earth, and the soft sounds of the animals made everything feel complete. I think they'd be proud, Buddy, he said, looking at the photograph of the Walker family. We brought their dream back to life. The wind rustled gently through the trees, and for a moment, Tom imagined hearing faint laughter, like the children of the past playing in the fields. He smiled, feeling comforted. The ranch was alive not just with plants and animals, but with memory and love. Weeks later, Tom decided it was time to expand the cabin slightly. He wanted a proper kitchen, a bigger sleeping area, and a small room for the diaries and treasures he had found. With Buddy carrying wood and Rusty following close behind, he worked from dawn to sunset. It was tiring, but each plank, each nail brought a sense of achievement. By the time the sun dipped behind the hills, the cabin was larger, stronger, and ready for many more years of life. One morning, a neighbor from Maple Creek came to visit. She brought her children and looked at the ranch with wide eyes. I never thought it would be possible, she said. You've made this land beautiful again. Tom smiled warmly. It wasn't just me. This land is alive. We just helped it a little. The children ran around the barn, laughing as Buddy followed them with careful steps. Rusty barked happily, chasing a butterfly. Tom watched them, feeling his heart swell with joy. The ranch had become more than a home for him. It was a place of happiness for others, too. As summer turned to autumn, the ranch reached its full potential. The vegetables were ripe for harvest, the animals were strong and healthy, and the fields looked like a green sea under the warm sun. Tom realized that he had rebuilt more than just the physical structures. He had rebuilt a life, a legacy, and a home full of hope. One evening, after feeding the animals and checking the fences, Tom sat on the porch of his cabin. Buddy lay nearby, chewing grass, and Rusty rested his head on Tom's boots. The valley was quiet, peaceful, and glowing in the golden light of the sunset. Tom thought about the journey he had taken, the burned ranch, the hidden spring, the diaries, and the trust of the Walker family. He realized that he had found more than a home. He had found a purpose. This is our home now, he said softly, a home that will last. He looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the sky. Each one seemed to shine a little brighter over the Walker Ranch as if celebrating its rebirth. The ranch had been burned decades ago, forgotten by time and people. But thanks to a poor cowboy with a loyal donkey, a little courage, and a lot of patience, it had been brought back to life. The fields were green, the animals thrived, and the memory of the Walker family lived on in every stone, every plant, and every drop of the hidden spring water beneath the land. Tom leaned back in his chair, feeling complete. The ranch was no longer just a place to live. It was a story of hope, courage, and dedication. It was a home restored, a dream fulfilled, and a life renewed. And as the wind whispered softly through the valley, carrying the scents of grass, water, and earth, Tom knew one thing for certain. He and Buddy had found a place where they truly belonged. The burned ranch had become alive again. It was a home, a haven, and a promise kept. The poor cowboy and his donkey had not just rebuilt a house. They had rebuilt a life, a legacy, and a home that would be remembered for generations to come.